So, emotion, is it the next frontier in horse training? Is horse training finally becoming emotionally mature? This is a summary presentation of emotional horsemanship. Make sure you've got your sound on for this so that you can follow along with me. So, if you don't know, my name is Lockie Phillips or Lachlan Phillips. I am a former professional ballet and modern dancer, teacher and choreographer. This was my previous career. Today, I am a horse trainer, I'm an instructor, a coach, and a hoof care provider. My primary focus is on the emotional aspect of horsemanship and species-appropriate equine stewardship. So, when we train horses, it's really important that we're setting an intention for the training that aligns with our principles. When you're setting your principles and setting your intention, here are some questions you could ask yourself. What do I want to experience with horses? Do I know who my or this horse is? Do I know my horse's history? Do I know my horse's natural tendencies? I won't impose my needs or wants, or will I impose my needs or wants? And setting an intention that I will show the horse who I am and just let the chips fall where they may. Set the intention that the horse may experience this session in any way they need or want to, including being triggered, confused, or worried. Negative states are normal pathways through and around positive states. Embrace all parts of being alive. And to the horse, we make a contract that I am not here to change or educate you or get something from you. I am here to be with you and to share with you. Hopefully you feel better and better about that as time goes on. So, some basic questions. Do horses have emotions? Yes, and we could put this under the category of feel, how horses feel. Are their emotions as complex as ours? The answer also is yes, and how do we know that? Well, it's about having empathy for how they feel and empathy, and I'll get into that later. Do horses have complex thoughts about their emotions like us? No, because that would be thought. Horses feel like us, they don't think like us. Let's summarize horsemanship in the last 30 years. So, horsemanship 10, 15, even 20 years ago was all about the horse's psychology, about how horses think. You change their mind, you change their behavior, which is about mechanical change based on thought. Training protocols based upon how we are different as a species. So when we had the predator versus prey phenomena rise up, this was about how we are different as species. The word respect was framed often as escalating pressure and release and alpha dominance theory. Natural, quote, natural can equal violent and coercive when it suits the human because violent tendencies have been observed in the natural or wild horse. This gave rise to dominance theory and mechanical training processes. Horsemanship now, what is on the cusp of the development in horsemanship? So behavior-based mechanics, biomechanics, that's what's happening now in many places. We have wanted versus unwanted behavior, which is set around human-based needs, what the human wants from the horse. How to get, make, or manipulate the behavior you want, but ethically. Operant conditioning training protocols, as far as I am concerned, are now mainstream. So that would be things like clicker training, positive reinforcement, learning theory, classical conditioning, meaning science discovered in 1937 is only now mainstream with horses. We have the anti-pressure movement, force-free movement. Pressure has become the new violence. We had the anti-violence movement 10, 15, 20 years ago. That has now evolved into anti-pressure. So let's do a quick neuroscience summary. In layman's terms, if I can. We have the lizard brain, the mammalian brain, and the human brain. The lizard brain concerns the brainstem. It concerns survival, instincts, automatic body functions, the nervous system responses, so fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. The mammalian brain sits in the middle of the brain rather than at the base of the brain. This concerns the limbic system, amongst others. It concerns emotion, memory, conscious movement. This is where dancing happens. It concerns social engagement and social attachment. It concerns expression without conscious thought or judgment of that expression. Then we have the human brain, which is unique to us and potentially some other mammals as well. We have the prefrontal cortex, or the prefrontal lobes. We have executive functioning. This part of the brain is abstract, meaning it can function in parameters not based in practical reality that the brain sees, feels, touches, senses. It's about focused attention, self-control, judgment, planning. It's about expression based on judgment. I only express myself if I have first thought about what I'm going to express. That is the human brain. Let's go deeper with this. So, the lizard brain developed approximately 250 million years ago. So we share this with horses because horses, just like us, can have gut feelings. They can sense safety or danger. This part of the brain underpins everything else that follows because it concerns basic needs being met. If basic needs aren't being met, you will trigger a lizard brain response, including the nervous system. This part of the brain is very mature, it's very evolved, it's highly developed and highly functional and very reliable. The mammalian brain is approximately 150 million years old, and we also share this with horses, indeed all other mammals, because all mammals, including humans and horses, have similarities in the way they sense the affective states of another, sensing emotions in others. We form memories in same ways, making movement skills, even though the movement behaviors might be dissimilar, the way we form those movement skills and remember those movement skills from a neuroscience perspective functions in very similar ways. We form emotional attachments and motivations. It's about somatic or physical awareness. And the mammalian brain can only start to function in a really functional way if the brainstem has given it approval. So you must first feel safe in order for the mammalian brain to start to function. Now the human brain is not so old. It's about 2 or 3 million years old, and unlike mammalian and lizard brain, it is more immature and a little bit more glitchy, and we don't actually share this with horses. Horses do have a prefrontal cortex, but it has evolved in a very, very different way to ours. So the human brain concerns a cognitive dissonance, it can concern dishonesty, you can form thoughts that are disconnected to your body, it can form thoughts that are disconnected from feelings or physiological states. It's about abstract invention. This part of the brain is desperate for novelty and for curiosity. It's a very hungry part of the brain. But this part of the brain is, from an evolutionary perspective, still kind of glitchy and immature. Let's go deeper with this. So we need to train ourselves to know the difference between instincts and feelings, which are shared with horse and human brains. You can be anthropomorphic when you're talking about instincts and feelings. You can be empathy-based when you're talking about instincts and feelings, and this equates for how we feel equals how we do. What you feel equals what you do. Thoughts, however, the horse and human brain are hugely divergent. It's about opinions, choices, plans, and beliefs. So when you hear someone talking about, oh, my horse chooses to make the plan to hate the training, this would be anthropomorphic, inaccurate, and inappropriate. It would be a misunderstanding of the horse as a species because we are divergent in the way we think. We are not so divergent in the way we process instincts and our feelings. Sympathy would then be an active choice, choosing to feel sympathy rather than empathy. And what would be the difference between sympathy and empathy? Empathy would be a body feeling, and sympathy would be a thought. I feel sorry for you. I think sorry thoughts for you, rather than I am aware of what you are feeling. But we're going to get into that in a moment. So let's look at this in layers, right? So thoughts sit on top, feelings sit in the middle, and instincts are right down in the bottom. Uncontrollable emotions. This is something a lot of people bring up when they're talking about emotions, that they feel emotions are uncontrollable and dysfunctional because they can't control them. So what are uncontrollable emotions? Well, a few options could be emotions that have long been suppressed by thoughts, learned beliefs, opinions, and conditioned responses that then overflood thoughts and send you over thresholds. So when your thoughts, the top part of your brain, suppresses deeper parts of the brain. It could be instincts bursting through from the bottom of the brain, cancelling out all higher functions, meaning feelings of safety become a priority. So it is possible that all three parts of these brains can swirl within the same soup. They don't work like elevators. They actually kind of all cooperate together and can pair up together, because you can be emotional about instincts. You can have feelings about our thoughts, and you can have thoughts about our feelings. We can also have thoughts about our instincts. We can have thoughts about deeper functioning. These things usually happen after the fact in the abstract. So when you've had a deeper function, a feeling or a thought, and then a feeling or an instinct rather, and then you have a thought about it, this usually happens after it has occurred. But feelings and instincts can happen spontaneously and in the moment. So when people say you need to be in the moment with horses, they're asking you to not be so clever and to get out of your head and be more in your body, meaning more with your feelings and your instincts. So, based upon this understanding, training with feel, people often think that feel-based training is like woo-woo and stuff for the out there and the unscientific, but it's not. Training based on feel is basic awareness of neuroscience and how horses and humans are most similar as two species in cooperation. Because feel is not new age, it's ancient. It's 200, 100 million years old. It is not clever thoughts and plans and protocols, it is memory, movement, and emotional awareness. Empathy is not sympathetic thoughts. It is finding or having a point of reference in your memory, movement, or emotional awareness for the affective experience of an other. The affective experience of an other. What does affective mean? Affective relates to moods, feelings, and attitudes, meaning I know, understand, sense, and feel how my horse feels. That's what I'm doing here with Caleb. I am feeling how he feels and offering what he might need in response to this obvious feeling. Empirical, on the other end of the spectrum, would be relating to experimented, experienced, and tangible real-world data, meaning I see, understand, recognize what my horse does, rather than what my horse feels. Both of these are important. The father of affective neuroscience, which is the study of the affective experience of an other, was the work of Dr. Jaak Panksepp, an Estonian neuroscientist, lived 1943 until 2017. He followed up on work started by Charles Darwin, decades before Panksepp, and he studied the neuroscience and the neuromechanics of emotion to try and bring some empirical substance to the study of an affective phenomena. The primary discovery with sufficient empirical data was that all mammals share at least the same neurological framework for emotion. Emotionally, mammals are almost identical to one another. We may process thought differently, but our limbic systems and emotional systems are so similar that any differences are almost scientifically negligible. So, I want to really drive this home. Remember, the primary discovery with sufficient empirical data that all mammals share at least the same neurological framework for emotion. That the scientific differences across mammalian species when it comes to emotion are almost scientifically negligible. Again, emotionally, mammals are almost identical to one another. We may process thought differently, but our limbic systems and emotional systems are so similar that any differences are scientifically negligible. I am repeating myself because this is so important. We can say it again and again and again, and still we see practices in this world where people are failing to understand that horses are experiencing fear, rage, panic, happiness, sadness in the same way that we do. In layman's terms, science found proof that horses have complex emotional lives and experience emotion in the same way the human brain does. Anthropomorphic emotional expressions do exist and are scientifically sound when we refer to horses, indeed, all animals. Duh. That's what many of us are going to be saying. Well, of course horses have emotions. I've seen it 1,000 times. I've seen it 1,000 times, but some of us don't still believe that this is true. So I just used humor, right? I made a little joke. I made you really, really bored and I repeated things over and over again, and then I made a joke. So I'm reinforcing information and improving retention by cueing it with a feeling in the body rather than a thought with the mind. This is how I'm teaching you right now. I'm teaching you with emotional expression. I got you bored, I got your attention through play, through humor, through joy. I activated your limbic system, which concerns memory, movement, and emotion, because I want you to retain this information, not to let it be, a clever thought that doesn't go anywhere. I want this to be an embodied awareness with horses, that horses feel just like us. Okay, so let's talk about Panksepp and effective neuroscience. He discovered the Panksepp 7 emotional systems identified in all brains with mammalian adaptations or more. These systems can fire singularly. I call that a singular expression. They can fire in combination together, or in succession combination expressions. These emotional systems are tied to movement. And all of this I go into great depth, of course, in the Udemy course on emotional horsemanship. So I'm not going to go into more depth of it here, but I go into great depth of it in the emotional horsemanship course hosted by Udemy. So let's go through them real quick. These are all pulled from my emotional horsemanship course. The most important for me, and for indeed all brains, the primary common denominator that must be present when you're training with emotional expression is care. Care is love, trust, concern, conscientiousness, effort or exertion, especially when it's self-motivated, interest, regard, enthusiasm, and respect. And respect has a little comma next to it because what we previously were looking for when we were training respect into our horses, what we really wanted, that horses care what we say, that they care what we do, that they care about us, they care about the training, and they care about themselves. We framed that as respect and tried to get it with dominance, but this was misleading, and this was misguided. What we now understand respect could have been, the evolution of respect, is that it has turned into care, and all of that it means. Let's move on. Seeking, this is really popular in the positive reinforcement community. We have searching, hunting, investigating, pursuing, adventure, travel, exploring, appealing, thinking, and considering. Next, we have lust. Lust concerns desire, excitement, libido, longing, urge, craving, needing, wishing, pining, wanting. Lust, it has a primary function with sexual functioning, but not only. Lust can happen outside of sexual functioning. You'll see geldings, for example, they will drop out their sheath when they're not sexually aroused, but when they are working in the lust system. And you've got to be really careful that when you think you might be doing seeking, what you might actually be triggering is lust. That's when you see horses that do a lot of treat rewards, a lot of positive reinforcement. When they get excited like that, it means you've gone into lust rather than seeking. So there's a little bit of a nuance between these two with horses. Play. Play is everyone's favorite. Play concerns joy, happiness, game, delight, romp, larks, teasing, jest, activity, frisk, and clown. Play is really, really popular amongst liberty trainers and the intrinsic movement. Okay, moving into some negatives, we have panic. Panic can also be known as loss, grief, to overreact, to be sensitive, to have alarm, hysteria, depression, sadness, fear, and frenzy. What we understand as sadness within the brain is actually the same system as panic, and though we often think panic is a highly aroused state, sadness is actually a form of panic in a depressed or a very low arousal. Now we have fear. Fear, tension, worry, anxiety, anticipation, dread, to be shy, nervousness, agitation, aversion, suspicion, and doubt. I think that's clear. Frustration or rage also concerns anger, annoyance, antagonize, offend, exasperate, unhappy, hatred, impatience, irritation, violence. I'm giving these associated terminology on the side because rage is one way to look at this emotional system, and using various languages to describe different words to describe these emotional states gives us an understanding of the nuances involved with the emotional systems. Okay, so people often say that to understand a horse's emotional state, you must understand their behavior and read their behavior. But I'm here to tell you that that's a good start, but it's not the end. It's not enough. Why is reading behavior not enough? Observation and interpretation, because the same behavior can be done with a variety of emotional motivations, because sometimes in horses 1 + 1 = 47. If we use behavior as our main tool, that will only lead us to confusion, because sometimes internal processes, things we can't see, are impacting what the horse does. And if you're only looking at external parameters to understand an internal phenomena, you will constantly be having trouble. So how can we understand our horse's emotional expression accurately and consistently? And my answer to this is that we can use a tool, a personal human tool called empathy. You can even go further into attunement, and we certainly should, but we need to start with empathy. Empathy concerns the sensing, the affective experience of another. Combine your empathy with your behavioral observation and analytical skills, and you will consistently and successfully interpret your horse's emotional expression. So again, why is reading behavior not enough? I'm just going to pull up this example from the Udemy online course. Look at these two postures of these two horses. Mechanically, they are very, very similar. Not totally identical, almost identical. Very similar mechanical behaviors. But one horse is experiencing one emotion and the other is experiencing another emotion. The expression of these horses is totally different, even though the behavior is almost the same. This is why reading action alone is not enough. That's one example. So, the positives. We have positive and negative emotion. There is yin and yang here. And remember that positive and negative as terms, these are human thoughts, human judgments and biases and prejudices about deep brain functions that have no natural value except that what we put on them. And there are positives and negatives to each positive and negative emotion. Stay with me. So let me list the dark side to positive emotions. Play can be hazardous or careless or manic when it is unmatured or unbalanced. Play can override self-care. Care can turn into compassion fatigue. It can tax your emotional reserves. It can lead to shutdown. It can lead to learned helplessness. Seeking, the dark side of seeking, can be the justification effect, reduced intrinsic motivation. Seeking mania can lead to frustrations. Lust, as a positive emotion, can turn into the codependency on a resource or a desirable. It can flood or shut down the brain when the desirable has been removed. So, what are the bright side to negative emotions? What are the positives to negative emotions? Fear. Fear informs you of safe parameters. It is essential. It is life-saving and preserving. Without fear, you do not know what safe parameters are. Rage. Rage gifts you self-confidence, self-dependency, and autonomy. Rage teaches you to set boundaries to protect yourself. Panic. Panic informs us of those things we need the most and the value they have when we lose them. Panic helps us to do a stock take of our lives. So, where do we begin with horses? And I use this little analogy here. I always start at the bottom of the brain, at the brain stem. Feeling safe with humans, domestication. It is amazing how many horses are highly and even artistically trained, but have missed that basic step of feeling safe with humans. And this is when you have a highly trained horse that has these niggling problems, and it's weird because they're so well trained. But they just have these weird little quirks and problems because someone got on with teaching them behaviors before they made sure that the horse felt safe in training, or the training process was a scary process for the horse. So that's where we begin. We begin at the beginning of the brain, the oldest part of the brain. Because, again, many well-trained horses have skipped or missed their domestication. When a horse has lacked their domestication, when care has not been significantly developed and downloaded as the lowest common denominator in training as the first priority, horses will behave in a way that looks like trauma, feels like trauma, but it may or may not be a trauma, it just might be missed domestication. Fundamentally, the horse has never felt safe with humans despite being well trained and well experienced. Care, how do we establish it? It can be established in a number of ways. We can ensure that we are LEMA, or least invasive, minimally aversive, in all matters, or as many matters as possible. We can ensure species-appropriate diet and lifestyle. We can do what I call 7-year-old child training. Basically, if you were with horses as a child, and you were around a horse as a 7-year-old, what would you do with them? And do that. You can spend a lot of undemanding time with them. That can develop care. However, it can help to have a dedicated groundwork technique that establishes this consistently and effectively. I have a technique called mother and foal bonding. It's a groundwork technique I use to train horses from scratch and ensure, develop, or check in with care before further training proceeds. It can be used to train a horse to be ridden or to reimagine riding as a shared activity, or it can just be a groundwork technique, teaching the horse to take care together of us. This is what this technique does, and the Emotional Horsemanship course on Udemy is concerned with that. So, how are most horses trained? What is the spatial relationship in most training protocols? We're just going to pivot here for a moment. You have something like this. You have a training space, you have a horse, of course, and you have a person. And the horse is usually on the outside of the person in the direction of travel. This horse is doing a circle, and they're on the outside of the circle, and the human is on the middle. I want to be sure to make really clear that this is just a stock photo I'm using for educational purposes. I do not approve of double nose brands. This sort of bungee equipment to the girth, I don't care what it's, I think it's draw reins. I think it's really bad training personally, but I'm just talking about how most horses are trained here just for educational purposes. And here's, I think, in fact, even the same horse. Again, we have horse on the outside, human on the inside. We have constraint devices, and we have rider trying to balance and a horse working hard. We have another example. Person on the inside, horse on the outside of travel, being made to move. Same horse, I think, again, same rider. Again, on the outside, human on the inside, being forced to move whether they like it or not. And even in, let's say, modern and nicer and kinder methods, here we have a liberty trainer. The human is indicating to go in a certain direction, the horse is on the outside of the circle and the human is on the middle. So even though the attitudes and principles are really different and the equipment is different, the spatial relationship is the same. And even here, we have an R plus trainer, right? This is a reverse round pen. This is using targets and treats, but the spatial relationship is the same. Horse is on the outside, human on the inside, even protected on the inside from the horse. So, again, most horses are trained with the spatial relationship of the horse is on the outside. But what is the first thing animal scientists know about the spatial and movement relationships toward safety in herbivorous quadrupeds? Remember, the brainstem must give approval to the rest of the brain to function. If you want your horse to be smart, they have to feel safe. And what is the spatial relationship in quadrupeds toward safety? Dr. Temple Grandin, I'm sticking with Dr. Temple Grandin. Dr. Temple Grandin. She revolutionized the meat processing industry, improving meat quality and profit, and most importantly, reducing animals' fear and improving welfare by redesigning facilities that capitalized on how herbivorous, herd-living quadrupeds move, relate spatially to their environment and to each other. She is an animal scientist, and she really understood the spatial relationships towards safety in quadrupeds. She used it to revolutionize the meat handling industry, and she understood that quadrupeds move in curves, not in straight lines. Again, here are some of her designs from her meat handling facilities, which she did not copyright, and you can download them. Everything is about making the animals move in curves, because when they move in a curve, they feel like they're going back to the center of their herd where they feel safer. Curves. Herbivorous, herd-dwelling quadrupeds feel safer when moving in curves as they feel they are returning to the center of the herd. And what is the significance of the center of a herd? So let's have this horse herd example, again pulled from the Udemy online course. So let's just imagine that this is a herd of horses in an open space. And you can kind of say that they have a general spatial relationship in a grouping, even though they might be set in random positions, but generally the direction of approaching hazards will come from where? Outside of the herd, generally not from inside of a healthy herd. So you have a spatial relationship in a curve, you have the inside of a herd, and you have the outside of a herd. This could almost look like a training area. The inside of the training area and the outside of the training area is where you are closest to danger. So another example here, we have generally speaking, we have the vulnerable members of the herd placed on the inside, and we have stronger members on the outside protecting those who are on the inside. So if domestication and care and safety are so important to a horse emotionally, why are we forming training approaches fundamentally based on ways in which horses are different to us? Why base training approaches on our needs as a priority instead of the horse's needs as a priority? Isn't it time that horse training grew up, matured? Why are we training horses to protect ourselves? Why aren't we training horses to protect horses or make them feel safe before we can get them confident about being on the outside of the herd? And it doesn't matter if you're doing traditional or non-traditional training, the spatial relationships generally are the same. Because it starts with us. We have to be self-aware. Are we aware of the effect that we have on horses? Are we using empathy, emotion, movement, and memory, or sympathy and protocol, abstract thought? Are we using self-awareness exercises are the best way to increase and improve your self-awareness and therefore your empathy. We need to rethink training horses on the outside of curves. We need to stop thinking mechanically and start feeling and intuiting. And after establishing a sense of safety and care, only then can training begin. So I want to thank you for sticking with me through this little presentation, and if you want to find out more, stick around on my website.